Welcome to Interviews from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson, and I'll be your host as we look at cutting-edge issues with the men and women who know them best, here on Telesur. Grassroots organizations in Mexico played a huge role in the victory of Andrés López Obrador in the presidential elections. And perhaps no sector was more active in that process than the small farmers or campesino sector. For years, campesinos in Mexico have been insisting that federal governments have abandoned the countryside in federal policy, favoring large corporations and foreign investment. Today, we're going to talk about the issues that the campesino sector faces and the new relationship with the new government. And to do that, we're very happy to have with us Jaime Castillo. Jaime is the National Commissioner for Unorca, which is the National Union of Autonomous Regional Campesino Organizations here in Mexico, and a leader of the farm sector in the state of Puebla. Jaime, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Laura. It's great that you're allowing us to share our opinion about the changes that this country is going through.
Jaime, in the peasant farm sector, many organizations, independent organizations, got together before the elections and developed a basic platform of some of the major policy changes that would be necessary to advance the interests of small farmers in the country. And as a candidate, López Obrador actually signed that platform called the Plan de Ayala 21st Century. Now that he's been elected, what do you think the possibilities are that that plan and that convergence that happened during the campaign will lead to a new rural agenda for Mexico?
Well, I think that with the agreement among various organizations to sign the Plan de Ayala, many demands were brought together in one platform in the plan. In general terms, I think that what we have to do in those debates and forums is figure out how we can achieve those goals. And something that we're concerned about is that we want to make sure that our proposals are really taken into consideration. We've given them a vote of confidence, but it's not a blank check. We now have to make sure that the proposal from the small farm movement can be taken into account. Today, I think that with this new framework, it's also important to give an opportunity to some other actors who didn't share the perspective of Andrés Manuel's candidacy. For those voices also to be heard, I think that we need to get past the campaign mindset. The campaign is over, and at this point, our concern is that after these forums, we need to review the new government's plans, and that we understand that a lot of proposals probably aren't going to be considered because they would be so complicated to implement, or because the new government just doesn't support them. But after these forums, we want them to give us the opportunity to hold a meeting where they say, okay, we took your proposals into account, this is going to be part of the new plan for the government, and heard the organizations, many of your demands are being incorporated. And the ones that aren't, why, we'd like to know why not. Maybe they can say we're in a hurry, they can say that we're running out of time. But I think that building this country, after you look at how the previous administrations left it, I think it will require a huge amount of work, a huge amount of effort, and we don't have to hurry. It's not a race. I think that it's an issue of strategic design, long-term design, and I think that we have enough time to sit down and start building the Mexico we want.
Well, so we see a situation where there seems to be an openness on the part of the government to at least listen to a wide variety of voices within the rural sector to begin to build another policy, a change in policy, a transformation, as López Obrador calls it, in the countryside. You know, we have an international audience, and you referred to the reconstruction of the country. In that sense, it also refers often to a crisis in Mexico's countryside. How would you characterize this crisis? Why is this such an important moment to change policy toward Mexican countryside?
There have been bad policies applied for a long time. We have problems with security and violence, we have problems with the environment, we have financial problems, and then there's the issue of the budget for government support to agriculture, which has been getting cut. And today we need to find a mechanism to make that limited budget more efficient. And we also need to design security policies, and that's the state's responsibility. But I think that civil society also has a lot to offer for how to rebuild in a situation like this. There is the issue of the environment, an issue that worries the small farm sector, and we need to find out how we are going to start this badly needed reconstruction. Today, people say that we need to strengthen the ejidos, we need to strengthen the communities, and I think it's important to start designing a strategic proposal with an economic, social, and political character that will develop and strengthen the ejidos, the communities, etc. But what we're worried about is that it shouldn't all come from one point of view. I understand that the new government has its own proposal of how to push for development of this country, but it's not about coming in and imposing it. It's about seeing what kind of situation we're in here in the countryside and what the people are proposing.
Because who's going to know it better than the farmers themselves? And it's interesting that you talk too about, we're not just talking about agricultural policy. We're talking about policy that has to do with the quality of life in the countryside, in the rural sector. That's much broader, and it also has to do with environmental issues and the other kinds of issues that you mentioned.
As I was saying, it's important that they are thinking about starting to rebuild from there, but they don't say how. That's the problem. Why? Because there are ejidos that have lost the practice of holding assemblies. There are ejidos that have lost many of their members because they left the United States or other countries. There are places where security forces have been withdrawn. There are places where ejidos were divided and legal figures of individual property rights were created under the reforms of the Article 27 of the Constitution, and that amounted to breaking up the ejido. Because the ejido should always have been seen above all as an organ of development. However, because of the neoliberal model that has developed, it was easier to negotiate with 10 or 15 people who made up an SPR, civil society organization, than to negotiate with an ejido with 80 or 200 or sometimes 300 members. So the problem today is to rebuild this part. That's why we say that as campesino organizations, we have a huge amount of work to do related to all of this. It's not enough to say that there will be a coordination in the state, there will be sub-coordinations, that there will be a promoter, because rebuilding the social fabric, it's another thing. It's not just about getting resources and support. We're sure that resources and support will get to the people, because we have the experiences of Mexico City, that during Andrés Manuel tenure as mayor, there were some changes that for some people, for the elderly, and in some other programs, the resources got to the people. We're sure about that. But what we don't want is to get into a situation where those who are in government don't know about the reality on the ground. The campesino organizations, we understand that reality, and I say that with modesty, and I think that we can help in this process. But also, we don't see ourselves reflecting government's proposal, the organizations in the proposal they have set forth. I don't see where we fit in. So that's something we're concerned about. It's because there should be a race for organizations who have been working in the country for years. We're the ones who have been trying to maintain production. Some of us got off track, that's true. But we can't deny that, but just as, and we say it like that openly, Just like some members of his government have expressed their support, I think that today, too, the farm organizations, we have the chance to seek our demands through this proposal and to generate better conditions for our members.
So we're talking about a new relationship here. And Unorca has in its name autonomous regional campesino organizations, which means separate from the state. How do you define this relationship then? Where you have an autonomous, you continue to be a grassroots movement, but you have a government where there's more willingness to negotiate, to participate. You have a history of what you call corporativism, which is famous here in Mexico. It means that the grassroots organizations form part of the party and the ruling system, and so you have a lot of pitfalls along the way. Are you having to reorganize in some sense to develop this new kind of relationship?
I think it has a lot to do with the position the new government takes. The new position has to do with knowing how to listen, because I think that sometimes our proposal might be deficient, but on the other hand, we can judge it against perfection. In these circumstances, we should try to find a middle path that both sides can agree on. I think that has a lot to do with the question of not giving in to the temptation of authoritarianism. Fundamentally, it has to do with knowing how to listen and being able to share the government's proposal with other actors from society and such. And I think that we shouldn't give in to the temptation. Look, one concern is that I feel like a lot of organizations that are part of the Plan de Ayala for the 21st century are acting according to a logic that it's almost like we're the new campesino structure within what is coming. Because in some cases, they are even acting like a political party. For example, we say, no. We, as Unorca, we're not going to affiliate because we're not a political party. We're going to participate, we're going to contribute, we're going to collaborate. But a lot of organizations didn't like that. But I think that shouldn't be what's respect is. That is the respect to say, okay, we're in. But one thing is for me to become part of a political party, because sometimes it turns out like that in practice, they act like that. And another thing is I have my own space where I demand respect. In fact, many of the organizations have legal status. In fact, I think the majority we have legal, so the law protects us. It's not just
a status of, what do you mean by public figures or legal figures?
For example, we're a civil association that is part of the legal framework of the Constitution or the secondary law. We are a rural production society that is also protected by Article 27 of the Constitution and has a legal status. You can't say I don't have a relationship with organizations because there is a legal representation, independently whether or not they join the party. In other words, we're not informal blocs. The informal blocs are those coalitions set up like Plan de Ayala for the 21st century, el countryside is everyone's, el campo can take the authentic countryside from each other. I think that many of us are going to rely on that institutional recognition. That's why we talk about institutional recognition where you, as the state, recognize me because I have an active life as part of society and recognition and legal status protected by the law and constitution.
And you represent farmers of different political affiliations.
Yes, there's a participation as part of USAL that came out of the Plan de Ayala for the 20th century, but we're trying to separate those different situations.
Well, let's move from the forms of organization that are obviously in flux in this new political moment here in Mexico to what some of the specific demands are. If you had to name 3 of the top demands of the movement right now as a new government comes into power, what would they be?
Budget and a more equitable distribution of the budget, and to start changing the structure and the way we think about the budget. Why? Because we need multi-year budgets. And this needs to be the innovation of this new government. Multi-year budget also often respond to international variables, national variables, often the issue of climate change, the issue of floods, etc. So we need another way of looking at things. And something that is important for us today is the budget.
And this allows farmers to plan and gives them some security in terms of what their situation will be, not just from one harvest to the next, but in the longer term, like say 3 years.
I think that we can't really determine how many years, because it's a process that's still under construction. I think that in that sense, we also have to understand that there are going to be adjustments. There is going to be resistance. There are going to be changes, but I think that it would be a little complicated to talk about specific changes and specific ranges of time. What we say is that we need to set aside that there is really the willingness to change, and those signs are to enter into discussions. Again, it's not that I impose my proposal over the proposal that I bring as government. We should welcome whatever proposal. But how can we enrich it? How can we build it from the standpoint of society and government? How can we create a government that we want, not the one they want, those who are ruling today? I think that this is the big challenge. How do we understand this part of building a new government, and how do we involve? Of course, society needs to participate. Society can't be watching the government and demanding that it change. We need to change. We're aware that society also needs to change. We need to change in a lot of ways. And there's a very, very simple example, even something as basic as littering. Tossing a piece of paper in the street, that implies also to begin to change, and for the government to be able to stand up and distinguish itself from the past. But society plays an important role, so we're not leaving the responsibility to the government. What we're saying to the government is build with us. That's what we're telling them, right? I think that this part plays an important role today. Like I said, I want to go back to the structures that I was talking about a while ago. I am worried about the possibility that a promoter, that's the person who files the request and goes and tells the applicants that they are going to receive support, that this promoter will have an advantage over someone else from society who might compete with him for elected office. How do you separate those things? How do you separate? How do you make sure that a state coordinator doesn't try to become governor? Those are issues that worry us, and we need to figure out how to solve them.
So we have the budget as one of the big issues, and not just the amount that's allocated toward the countryside, but the way it's distributed, because there have been a lot of criticisms as well that the budget has gone to large producers when it's the small producers who really need the support. What would be the second issue that you'd put at the top of your list?
I think that we need a legislative agenda. I think that there are a lot of places where we need to apply pressure. I'm not necessarily saying that we need to create new laws. We should revise the ones that already exist, the biodiversity law, the water law, the budget law, which I was talking about earlier, because there is a specific law about the budget, a real transparency law. What I'm saying is that we need to pay attention to how the budget is being created and implemented in a clear way. To this day, no government has done that, even though they have bragged that there is an Institute for Transparency, but in practice, we haven't gotten to the core of what needs to be done. The budget always gets implemented, but we don't know how they were implemented. And sometimes that leads to discretionary uses. For example, the government makes an agreement with some organization, with some other organization, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, and that leads to a situation like the one we have today, and there was no mechanism that allowed us to evaluate.
A lack of public information.
That's important at every sphere. It's good
Está bien,
that
hay una
there is
ley
a
de
transparency
transparencia y el
law, a
instituto,
transparency institute,
bueno, ¿cómo lo
but how do we
fortalecemos? Para no crear
strengthen
más
that?
leyes, ¿cómo
So,
hacemos que
how
realmente
do
sea
we make more
operativo? ¿Cómo hacemos
laws?
que funcione?
How
Tenemos
can
una ley de
make it
biodiversidad.
really
Bueno,
work
revisemos
without
las partes
making more
conflictivas
laws?
de esa ley de
How can make it
biodiversidad.
to do what it's
Entonces,
supposed to do?
tampoco se
We
trata
have
de quitar por quitar,
uh,
sino se trata de encontrar los
biodiversity
argumentos de
law.
por qué algo se
Not
debe
talking
de
about
quitar.
taking out parts
Sí.
of it just for the sake of taking out.
Creo
I'm
que eso
talking about
juega un papel
finding the arguments
importante
about why
de
something
revisar
should be
el
taken
asunto
away.
legislativo.
I think that
Traen varias
reviewing all this
iniciativas en el plan de
legislation
Ayala,
will
se han
play an
planteado,
important
algunos que
role. There are
lograron
several
ser
initiatives that
candidatos
had come from
ganaron.
Plan de Ayala.
De
And
hecho, están
some of the
retomando
members
una
of that
agenda de
bloc were
carácter
elected to public
legislativo,
offices.
incluye
In fact,
mucho
they're bringing
también
them with
estos temas.
legislative
Y
agenda
yo
that
creo
includes a lot
que
of those issues.
pues
I
en
think
ese
that when it
asunto son
comes,
cuestiones que tenemos que
we need to start to
entrarle
debate
ya
around these
al debate.
issues.
Mexico has a lot of, actually has a number of good laws on the books that are not being fully implemented. One of those also that's been very important to Unorca is the food sovereignty law that was passed not long ago, the right to food. How do you see that playing into the work that you'll be doing in the years to come?
Mira, todo lo que se ha venido
Look, all the
generando en
ideas
los
that we've
últimos
been
días, yo
generating
creo
in
que
the past
forma
few
parte del
days, I think that they are the result of
de
the
muchos
efforts
actores sociales,
of many
muchos
social
institutos
forces,
de
including many
individual.
individuals.
Yo creo que algo que
I think something that we need to is to
necesitamos
find
es
these
ir
points of
encontrando esos
agreement,
puntos de coincidencia,
because
porque a veces
sometimes we
pensamos
think
que
that
porque
just because we
nosotros
supported
llevamos
Andrés
o
Manuel,
respaldamos
we
a
didn't
Andrés
bring
Manuel,
him
pero
to
llevamos
power,
o
we supported
respaldamos,
him.
pues llevamos
That,
manos sobre otros. Yo creo que
that's why we
tenemos
have
que
an
ir haciendo a un
advantage
lado
over
ese
the
tipo de conceptos.
others.
Y te lo
I
digo por
think
lo
that we need
siguiente,
to
¿no?
put that kind of
Durante
idea
muchos años se
aside.
generó
And this is why we're saying this. For many years,
posición,
since the founding of
Unorca lo ha empujado
Unorca,
muy fuertemente,
we've
incluso
been
desde
pushing
sus
for
orígenes,
food
la cuestión de garantizar
sovereignty.
soberanía alimentaria.
We think that food
Nosotros decimos que
sovereignty
es un
is a
concepto
realistic
alcanzable.
goal. Of course,
Evidentemente
it also
tiene que ver
implies
con la cuestión
modifying,
de
transforming
modificar,
the
de
issue of the
transformar, la
budget,
cuestión del
the
presupuesto,
issue of the
la cuestión de
distribution
la
of the budget, the
distribución
issue of
del
access to
mismo, la
generic
cuestión de
resources, the issue of
el acceso
biodiversity.
a los recursos genéticos, la cuestión de la biodiversidad.
Imports?
Y
Well,
nosotros seguimos
we still maintain
manteniendo
our
el rechazo a la
rejection
cuestión
of
de
exports and
las,
imports. We maintain our
exportaciones e
rejection for the
importaciones.
free
Seguimos
trade
manteniendo el rechazo a lo
agreement.
que es el Tratado de Libre Comercio. La
That's
Unorca-
what I want to ask about. Where are there points in which your agenda comes into conflict with the free trade agreement? We're in the process of renegotiation still, and it could come out looking not too different from what it looks like right now. Will there be clashes there legally?
Yo creo que nosotros
I
no
think
vamos
that we're
a-
not going
a-
to
a
go back
ceder
down
en
from our
nuestra
position with
opinión
regard to the
respecto a
trade
la cuestión de
agreement.
los tratados.
I understand the issue that this
entiendo,
new government is
la
joining the
cuestión de
negotiation, well, not joining.
también este
They're
nuevo
participating
gobierno
in
se
the
está sumando a las
negotiations,
negociaciones.
seeing
Bueno, no
what the
sumando, sino está
situation looks
participando
like.
ya,
And
viendo
as
cómo
I
está el
understand
panorama.
it, the new
Y
government
hasta
is
donde
proposing
entiendo, ellos
another
están
plan
planteando otra
to change
situación para
our trade
revertir,
policy to
no
not depend
depender
so
tanto
much
de las importaciones, sino
on
aumentar
imports
la
and to increase
productividad aquí,
productivity
y
here.
con eso
With
poder
that,
evitar que
be able to avoid
estemos
importing so much having
importando,
demand for food from
teniendo una
other
demanda
countries.
en materia alimentaria
I
de
think
otros
that
países.
yes, it's
Yo creo que
important.
sí es
We are in support
importante.
of free,
Nosotros sí estamos
that's
en
what
el
we
libre,
call
le
it,
decimos
free
así,
exchange of
intercambio de
products,
productos,
which
que
is
es muy
very
distinto a
different from
cómo se
the
maneja en el
situation that
tratado
we're
por los
in
acuerdos
with
leoninos
NAFTA,
de
which is full
reducción
of
de
those
subsidios, de
agreements
tienes
that
que
only
hacer
benefits
esto,
a
de
few,
política,
mandating the reduction of
en
A
subsidies.
international foreign importer or producer has the same rights as national, that you can't favor national producers for a national market. There's a series of barriers there to a different concept of production and relationship within the country.
Nosotros
We say
decimos,
that everything that we
todo lo que
produce,
se
first of
produce,
all,
en primer
we need to
lugar,
figure
tenemos
out
que ver
how
de
to
qué
use
manera
it to satisfy
satisfacemos la
demand in the
demanda del
country
país.
when
En
it
materia
comes
de
to
maíz,
corn,
frijol,
beans,
hortalizas,
vegetables, etc.
etcétera. Hay
There are
distintas,
various products in our country
distintos
that can be better
productos en nuestro
distributed.
país para ir
You
avanzando
know
a poder
that
hacer una
every day in
distribución
food
de
distribution
productos. Tú lo
centers,
sabes,
they
diariamente
throw
en las
away
centrales de abasto
tons of food,
se tiran
tons of
toneladas de
products,
alimentos,
etc. I
productos
think that we need
hortícolas,
to
etcétera,
guarantee
Yo
that the
creo que
products
tenemos
are
que
properly
garantizar que los productos
distributed.
tengan una correcta distribución.
The
El problema
problem
hoy
today is
actualmente
that
es que
there
no
is
hay
no
una
good
buena
distribution of
distribución de
food.
los alimentos.
There's no
Hay
there is production,
sí,
yes, there is.
tenemos
We
que
know that there is
producir.
production.
Y esa sería
And
una de
this
las
will
primeras
be
partes,
one
como
of the
que
first
ordenar los
steps,
mercados
the
locales.
better organized
Decir, a
local
ver,
markets to say,
vamos
well,
a
let's see,
garantizar
we're
que lo
going
que
to
se
make
produce
sure
lo
that what gets
redistribuyamos. El
produced
problema
will
es ese.
distribute it.
Porque, por
That's
ejemplo,
the
yo siembro una
challenge.
hectárea de,
Because, for example, if
brócoli,
a
pues yo no voy a
hectare of
consumir toda
broccoli,
la hectárea
well,
de brócoli.
I'm not going to
Pero
eat
si
a whole hectare
generamos
of broccoli.
algunos
broccoli. But if we set up some supply center where other people who produce broccoli and it gets redistributed, and what is left over, you channel it into the national market, and then what is left over in the national market, well, we're not against offering those products to other countries.
But first, we need to create food self-sufficiency, which in turn will guarantee sovereignty. I think that's part of it.
And reduce the waste.
Of course, it has to do with that. Hopefully we're getting to that point. We're going to try to, well, in Unorca, we've been pushing for a new program that we call Zero Hunger, and we're not copying the Brazilian model. They have their own with Lula. They had their own program, their own policy design, their own ways to solve the problem. Here, we need to sit down to discuss how we are going to solve this problem. And it has to do with the issue of food that we were talking about. First of all, some of the things that Andrés Manuel has proposed, like including the idea of community with kitchens, where the people can have access to healthy, high-quality food, etc. Yes, that's good. But we also need to talk about shared responsibility. Because if there's a community kitchen, maybe I end up going there every day to eat and I wouldn't work anymore, right? So what is the shared responsibility going to look like in the places where Sir King is going to be working? How are we going to be able to turn this around? So it's not welfare. No, that's the problem. We need to talk about that. How do we see this issue? In a way that doesn't just focus on the narrow problem, because you can solve the problem of hunger with that logic, but then it becomes a welfare policy, which I don't think it will be good for anyone. And we also say that in this program, Zero Hunger, we also need to include another important question in this country, which is the question of how people will have access to a basic food basket that is healthy. Because there's another thing that they haven't told us. It's still unclear, because they've said they're going to rebuild some refineries, that they're going to promote fertilizer production, and we're going to have access to that fertilizer. But what's still not clear is the transition towards another kind of production, like organic.
Yeah, we haven't even hardly talked about sustainability, which is a key part of any new plan for the countryside and for rural production.
Because there are a lot of things that we can agree on at this point. We agree that the refineries should be rebuilt, that fuel should be made cheaper, although they say that won't be immediate, that it will be long-term. Okay, we understand that part. But they haven't told us how to move towards cleaner energy. That part is still in the air. And I understand they haven't taken office yet. We still have a long way ahead of us. But I think it's time to talk about that, right?
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there, because we've come to the end of the program. There are so many more issues that we have to talk about, and that this process of consulting and organizing in the countryside to be able to have an opportunity to change some of those critical policies in the government is really just beginning. So we wish you a lot of success in that whole process, and thanks so much for being with us here on Interviews from Mexico.
Thank you for the invitation,
Thanks
Laura.
again. And thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week on Interviews from Mexico.